Hello everybody, hope you're doing well. I'm going to go ahead and get this started. There's a slight lag on my end, but no worries. All right, make sure that we are all functioning here. How are you guys doing this evening? Hope you're having a good night. Adjust the quality here. Took me a minute to get ready. Yeah, I'm having a little bit of technical trouble on my end. It took me a few more minutes longer than I expected to get on. But we will get there. All right. Let me try this. Let me try refreshing the page. See if that doesn't fix the problem. It's always something. It's always something. Oh, well. Okay. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. Hello, folks. Hope you guys are doing well. Welcome to another Raven's Roost Read and Chill stream. I'm the Raven Knight. I'm happy to be here with you guys. I'm really excited to get into the reading for this evening. Now, as I'm pulling up the stories to read tonight, I want to say a few things first. The last few times we have done this series, the last few times we've done a chill and read stream, some things have gone on in chat that are not cool, frankly. And I'm not here to point fingers or play the blame game. That's not my goal here. We've moved past it. But since it's happened twice, this will be the third and final warning, I'm afraid. If things like that happen again, like the kind of stuff that I saw in chat, then we won't do this anymore, because I want this to be a place where we can enjoy listening to stories, talk about them, and just have a chill, good time. And if we're going to start bringing drama and stuff into chat, we're just not going to do this. It's not me coming after you guys. It's just the goal of this series was to share my stories with you, to hang out, to chill and relax, because Mondays are stressful. Mondays are people going back to school, going back to work, and I want to chill out on a Monday and have a good time with you guys, so let's try to make this as good as it can possibly be, all right? All right. So, tonight, let's go ahead and pick out what we're going to start with. Yes, I will read some more New Epic, but before I do that, I'd like to, as usual, I'd like to start with something different. Maybe something a little bit more, not necessarily starting another long story, but maybe read another one of my stories in general. Let's see what we've got. I know I've got some good ones around here. I'm going through my list of stories. Got a lot of good ones here. Let's try... No, that one's not a good one. I mean, I like it, but it's not a good one to start the night with. And I have a lot of those. No. Let's try. Okay, yeah, I know something. I know something we could try. Y'all really seem to like my Edenite Chronicle stories. So let's do another Edenite story. Let's do another one of my Edenite stories. That'll be good. I have a few. Let's try Staying Ahead. I like this one. Staying Ahead was a good one. I wrote this one. I don't think it was that long ago that I actually wrote this one. It was September 13th, 2023. So no, it wasn't very long ago at all. This one was one that I wrote for my buddy Aaron. I wish you were here to hear this. Hannah, you're here. Glad you're here. While I'm thinking about it, I'm going to go ahead and make you, Hannah, one of my moderators. There we go. Hannah, you are now officially a managing moderator for the channel. Please don't abuse that power. I know you won't. You'll do right by me. All right. Anyway, here we go. So let's read an Edenite story. This one is called Staying Ahead. Now, for those who do not know, the Edenite Chronicles is basically a story series. It's an anthology series that tells the story of the crossing of two worlds. You have our world, the human world, Earth, and you have a alternate dimension that has no humans in it, but it's filled with monster people. And there's a portal in the Bermuda Triangle that crosses between these two worlds. And a couple of years after this portal was discovered, humans and monster people have gone back and forth between the two worlds to kind of learn about each other's worlds, move sides, and grow in understanding and technology and stuff like that. And these are just anthology series of people going to the other world, and other people from that world coming to our world. And so we're going to share one of those tonight. Here we go. Hope y'all enjoy. This is, like I said, it's called staying ahead. I think that I was born under a certain star. Whether it's lucky or unlucky, I have yet to determine. But I can't deny that strange occurrences always seem to happen to me. Be it at school or work, whether I ask for it or not, I find myself wrapped up in odd situations. Usually they don't concern me or I have little to do with them, but I end up in the middle somehow. I make it a point to stay out of things that don't involve me directly. It's just safer that way. And yet, despite that, fate has a strange way of forcing my hand. My grandfather used to tell me that you can't control what life throws at you, but you can control how you respond to it. And he was right, in ways I'm sure he never would have imagined. After all, only 2 years after he passed away, Eden was discovered. A massive rift in reality had appeared in the Bermuda Triangle, leading to another world altogether known as Eden. This world had no humans in it, but it did contain other races and species like a fantasy novel. Elves, dwarves, minotaurs, centaurs, and others besides. At first, the world braced for war with this fantasy world, but in time tension subsided. Trade was offered, and now there is some integration between our worlds. At first, I barely noticed the changes, but as time passed, I'd occasionally catch sight of an odd elf or dwarf walking around barely noticeable. I figured it wasn't such a big deal. Nothing earth-shattering or outlandish, anyway. Hell, dwarves were just shorter than most humans and were definitely more hairy, and elves looked like young folks with long hair. What was to be bothered about? Well, I found out Eden had far more than just elves and dwarves. And I suppose that encounter further proved that I was born to some kind of lucky or unlucky star, depending on how you look at it. The day it happened, I was walking home from work and decided to stop off at a bar for a bit. It's not that I normally frequented this place, but it was on my way home and I found I was a bit thirsty, so I stopped by for a glass of something. As I approached the bar, I heard a loud squeal and turned to see a figure kneeling beside a big red motorcycle. She had her back to me, but I could tell from the shape of her figure that she was certainly female. She had on tight jeans that looked faded and worn, a black leather jacket with a fur collar, and a pair of crossed scythes stitched into the back. I could also just make out her boots, but otherwise I couldn't see anything else. I couldn't see her head because she was bending over, but she sounded distressed. No, why won't you just... she grumbled to herself. I made it a point to stay out of people's business. Just do your own thing and let other people do what they needed to do. But something about the pathetic whimpering the girl was making made me all the more interested in helping. Looking down, I noticed a glint of metal and saw a socket wrench lying a few feet away from her. Perhaps she couldn't see it in the dark. With a light kick, I knocked the wrench over to her and I saw it bump her boot. She turned fast to look in that direction and pick it up, but the grumbling and whimpering stopped, and I headed into the bar. I'd done my good deed of the day, and that was all I needed to do. I sat down at a booth, and a guy walked out from behind the bar. He had a gruff face with a scar along the left side of his cheek. His hair was thinning in the center, and his jowls quivered when he spoke. "What'll you have?" "A tall house draft," I answered. The man nodded and walked back to the bar to get it, while I pulled out my cell phone to stare at nothing in particular. The negative side of staying out of other people's business was I didn't have much social interaction, so I rarely got texts from anyone other than my mom or dad. But it was just a habit, pulling out the phone and just shifting through websites just to kill time. The drink reached me and slid in front of me with a dull roll, and I glanced at the yellow liquid and foamy top. "Thanks," I said absentmindedly. "No problem," the man said with a shrug, turning back to the bar. "Holler if you need another." I probably wouldn't, but I just nodded politely. Even if I was a recluse, I could still be polite. I sipped the foam off the top of the glass, and it was probably that which blocked my view of her coming over to my table. Because if I had seen her more closely, I would have sprayed my beer all over the table. "I'll have the usual, Tom," the girl called. "Sure thing. Good ride tonight?" the bartender asked. "Had a bit of trouble getting here, but I should be okay to make it home," she answered. Then I felt the sensation of a figure dropping down on the booth seat across from me. I glanced up and choked on my beer. Sitting before me was undoubtedly the girl from earlier who was fixing her motorcycle. Now that I saw her from the front, I could see her leather jacket was open with a white t-shirt underneath, a rock band logo on it that I didn't recognize, but the curvature of her breast distorted the logo anyway, so it didn't matter. Her pants were indeed worn and torn at the front and back, and her hands were fitting into a pair of black leather gloves, but none of that's what caught my eye first. The first thing I noticed was that her head was missing off its neck. Simply a bright blue flame that burned brightly out of her shirt where normally one would find a neck. But a simple glance down showed me where her head was. Her gloved hands were holding it, nestled like one might hold a melon or a crystal ball. The head of this girl had blonde hair and blue eyes, the color of the fire burning from her shoulders. She had on a big smile, and it took every ounce of willpower not to just scream at the sight of her. Thanks for your help out there, the girl said with a laugh. That was you who found my wrench, right? I didn't answer her. I was too busy staring wide-eyed and mouth agape at the flame where her neck was to and to the head that was in her hands. I noticed she spoke with a sort of southern or country-style twang to her voice that I might normally have found cute or even attractive if I wasn't currently lost in shock. Oh, right, yeah, y'all ain't used to this, are you? She laughed again, her head bobbing slightly as she did. Her hands lifted her up so her eyes were level, and I scooted back quick. No need to look so pale. Name's Emily, and yes, I'm a Doulahan. She said that like I was supposed to know what that was, or even care. Instead, I just stared and pointed. How? I finally squeaked. She snickered and used her hands to turn her head so it would face Tom. Got a tenderfoot here, Tom. First time meeting him myself, Tom called back, still working behind the bar to make her drink. Go easy on him. Y'all act like I'm some sort of bully, she laughed, turning her head back to me. She adjusted her head to rest it on one hand and used her other hand to brush her hair out of her eyes. It was remarkable to witness. Listen, Doulahans are a type of race that look human, but our heads are detached from our bodies. There ain't a lot of us around. Yeah, is that so? I asked, struggling to calm myself down. So, I'm guessing you're from Eden? That's right, her face beamed. And I wanted to thank you for your helping me find that darn wrench. It can be hard to find stuff when I drop them for, well, obvious reasons. I put my head under the cycle while my body fixed it, but I couldn't see where I put my stuff, so I was a bit, well, you get it. I didn't get it. I didn't get any of this, but my shock at the sight of a headless woman was slowly starting to fade a bit. I drank some of the beer in front of me, and as I did, Tom appeared with a margarita glass of red alcohol. I'm buying his beer too, Tom. With what money? He smirked. Darn it all, Tom, you know I'm good for it, she pouted, turning her head angrily. I'm joking, kid, I'm joking, Tom chuckled. Don't lose your head. Arr! Emily swiftly set her head on the table as her body jumped up and started thrashing at Tom. He laughed, evading her childish hits as her head shouted obscenities after him. That jerk, she growled as her body came back to sit down. He ain't got to go rubbing stuff in like that. As her body returned to the booth, it reached down and picked up her head again and adjusted it to face me. Sorry about him. He's a big kidder. Right. Sure, I muttered. Emily smiled. Still nervous, right? She asked. Yeah, a bit. She smiled and reached out, moving her head closer, so we were a lot closer, and I backed my head up. I ain't dangerous. I know, it's just, different, I confessed finally. Well, you're honest, at least, she laughed, pulling her head back. Most folks just scream and run away. Oh, sorry about that. Nah, it's fine, she laughed. You get used to it. That's why I spend most of my time with Crimson. Then I do people. Crimson? I asked. My bike, she said excitedly. Prettiest piece of metal you ever read. But you named it Crimson? What, you got a good enough name that I should replace it? She asked. Why name it? Why not? We both stared at each other a long time, the novelty of me literally talking to a head starting to wear thin. She seemed friendly enough, just a little odd. She tilted her head down to sip from the straw of her drink, and I finally couldn't stop myself. How do you live like that? It was a rude question, but she didn't seem to mind. She finished her sip and shrugged. Hell if I know. You don't even know? I'm just born this way, she shrugged her shoulders. I ain't got no medical degree or science degree to tell you how it all works. I just know I always been like this. So how does food or I eat and drink like you, just ain't got no throat nowhere, she answered. Sorry, it's... No offense, this is just hard to rationalize. She giggled and sipped from her margarita glass again before speaking. Well, I find it easier to just go with things, you know? So, what's your name? She asked. Daniel, I answered. Well, Daniel, thanks for helping me finding that wrench, she said with a smile. I nodded nervously, and then suddenly I saw her shove her head up and under my nose. I yelped and staggered back. You're looking away. I mean, you're welcome? Still not comfortable with my head, are you? She asked. Well, I mean, I'm not going to get used to it right away, I sighed. Well, let me help you then. I stared at her head and body curiously. How? I'll let you hold my head. What? I cried. It's easy. If you learn to get used to that, that's the first step. That's a really bad idea, I said quickly. What, got butterfingers? No, it's your head. And I trust your hands, she said with a smile. Go on. I hesitated a moment and then reached out, placing my hands on either side of her head and gently lifting. She was lighter than I expected. I lifted her head up and stared awkwardly. Like this, right? Almost, but it's a bit uncomfortable. Place your hands under my jaw, she instructed. I adjusted my hands and she sighed. That's better. See? Y'all got it. I gave a nervous smile and glanced at her body, which was sitting patiently and cracking her fingers and knuckles. Thanks for that. My arms and hands get tired sometimes, so letting you hold my head lets me adjust my hand some. All right, so, sorry to ask, but, how do you drive a motorcycle like this? Oh, yeah, that's the tricky part, she admitted. It took a lot of practice. I tuck my head under one arm and drive with one hand on the handlebar. That's incredibly dangerous, I cried. Well, a car's even worse. My head would roll off the dashboard. My body can't be without my head doing that for it, so I either have to walk or ride a cycle, she explained. So you have full control of your body? Of course I do. But my body can't see, hear, taste, touch, or smell. Well, it can touch, but that's not the important thing. My head does all the rest of that, she explained. I sat there holding her head for a long time before I saw her body reach over and push her drink closer to me. Would you mind tilting my head closer to the glass? Right, sure. I adjusted her head and she sipped away, and oddly I was beginning to get a bit more accustomed to this. Oh, she must like you, kid. Didn't let me hold her head until the fourth time she visited, Tom laughed as he cleaned the glass behind the bar. Tom, you son of a... Just stating facts. But it was too late. Emily's body was already on her feet, storming over to Tom to hit him again, while her head kept blushing and growling angrily. I stood still, making sure not to do anything odd with Emily's head, but after a moment she calmed down and her body came back. He is so annoying. Sorry about that. You come here a lot? My home isn't too far, so I practice riding my bike and drop by here to talk to Tom. He's friendly. Got used to me being a Doulahan real quick, she explained. Who else is used to you? I asked. Well, since coming to Earth, there's Tom and my landlady and you. That's it? That's it, she answered. And why go out of your way to talk to me? I asked. Well, you helped me. I thought you was friendly, she answered. I mean, if I'm honest, I didn't know you were a Doulahan when I kicked the wrench at you. I would have just walked on normally, so I'm really not someone that special, I pointed out. Well, you did help anywho, she answered. Why focus so much on what you'd normally do when you did something special? I mean, that's worth something. You think so? I asked. She closed her eyes and I saw her hands twitch, which probably meant she wanted to nod, so I tipped my hand slightly to let her. I know so. Say, want to ride back to your place? I got room on my cycle. No, that's okay. No, it's totally safe. All I gotta do is sit behind me, wrap your arms around, and hold my head in front. I'd be able to use both hands. Not happening, I snickered. To my surprise, she laughed and her body reached out to take her head back. I handed it back to her and she smiled brightly. Well, you'll come around eventually, Daniel, but I do think you're a sweet guy. Here. Her body reached over to a napkin on the table and held out her hand to me. You got a pen? Tom, you got a pen, she called. Heads up. I ducked in time to see a pen go flying from the bar. Without flinching, Emily's hand shot up and caught it, bringing it down. Whoa, good catch. When you don't have a head on your shoulders, you're not as afraid of thrown objects hitting it, she answered. So I focus more on catching than dodging. There. This is my cell number. Give me a call sometime and I'd love to chat with you more. She then slid out of the booth and put her money on the table. Why do you want to chat with me? I asked, exhausted. Like I say, you're a sweet guy, and it's nice having someone like you to talk to. And what am I, chopped steak? Tom called. Nah, chopped steak is pleasant, and you're a brat. Up yours, you old fart. I couldn't stop myself from smiling as she shouted back at him. She then winked at me and hurried out the door. See ya! As she left, I watched her through the window. Just as she'd told me, she tucked her head up under her arm and put a helmet on it to boot. She then straddled that crimson cycle and kicked it off, one-handed and with the confidence of a professional cyclist. She then rode off down the road. You know, Tom sighed, walking by to pick up her empty drink and money. I never ask her to pay. She just wants to. Why don't you ask her? I asked. She doesn't have a job, Tom replied. No one wants to hire someone like her, sad as it is. Among the Edenites, Doulahans are even more rare than most, and people just can't handle them. Most folks who see her run away or scream at the sight of her. And I know she smiles it off, but I can tell she was really happy to meet you, kid. First guy in a long time who doesn't mind what she is. I frowned, thinking about her big smile and cheerful attitude. Tom, I'll be honest, I'm not that special. I helped her without knowing about what she was, and when I saw her real self, I was too shocked to even think about screaming. Really, I'm no better than those other assholes who scream at her, I grumbled. You held her head in your hands, Tom replied. That's not something just any Doulahan would let someone do. And even if you don't think you're all that, she thinks it, and she wants you to be it. So do me a favor, kid. Just don't hurt that girl. I didn't say a word, but in my heart I answered him. I would do everything in my power not to hurt Emily. Ever. And that is staying ahead. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Give me just a second. I need to take a drink. And then we can carry on. Carry on my wayward son. There'll be peace when you are done. Anyway. Yep, sometimes you just need that good old wholesome vibe, you know? But I like those wholesome stories. That's kind of what the Edenite Chronicles was meant to be. Kind of a wholesome series of stories. And we may read more down the line, but for now, I know what y'all want. Y'all want to continue New Epic. Got good news about that, by the way. Hannah and Aaron have both said that they're interested in carrying on the story, so we may actually do more of that. We will see. Now, let me see. Chat, rate this story between 1 and 10 and say what your favorite part was. Ooh, that's a cool idea. An 8.5 from Seed of Gabriel. Okay. Let me check and see where we left off. All right, I think we left off on chapter 12 since last time. Atla, is your body a separate consciousness? No, she answered that question. All right. Well, next we're going to go into New Epoch chapter 12. For those who are new to the channel, you'll want to start at the beginning of this series to learn about what New Epic is. But for those of you who are familiar, we will dive right into it. Y'all ready? New Epic, chapter 12. When Blemish finally woke up, he rubbed his head in confusion. He glanced around, replacing his mask quickly. He felt a gentle relief in his joints and body and noticed his injury seemed better. The pain was not as great, and his bandages had been replaced. Had the doctor put him to sleep? He cursed himself silently for his stupidity. Only a fool lets down his guard so easily. He managed to stand up for a few moments and walk around, but the sudden movement brought stabbing pain to his side and shoulder, and he sat back down again. He groaned and shook his head, frustrated and fatigued. Well, look who's up and moving. Blemish looked to see Titania walking in and smiling. The sunlight pouring into the window added a lovely aura to her that made Blemish smile as he lowered his mask. It felt good to put his mask down around Titania. She knelt down and inspected his bandages. You shouldn't be moving too much, though. Aenor did a good job on you, but he warned you should stay relatively still while the potions and stitches do their job. Potions and stitches? Blemish asked. Titania went into the explanation for what Aenor and Philip had done. Blemish listened intently, and he smiled happily, glad he'd be well again in a few days. He was even more happy to hear that he'd get another shot at Josiah's life. Our biggest problem right now, though, is how do we do it, Titania explained solemnly. That's what we want your help with. My help? We're going to help you take down Josiah. But we need to know the best way to do it. You're trained for this kind of thing. It makes sense you might have a solution. Blemish blinked and shook his head. No, I should do this alone. You don't have to worry about us. It's not that. I don't know what you would do, Blemish replied. I've always done these things alone. I don't know how to best do this with a group. Titania smiled and placed a hand on his knee as she sat next to him. Well then, think about this, she encouraged. Imagine how you would do it alone. Think about all the things you have to go through to get in, and get to Josiah, and get out again. What are things that would make that easier for you? What are some obstacles and problems you face that you'd like solutions to? That's where we come in. You come up with a plan, and we'll do what you tell us. Blemish paused to think, rubbing his head in concentration. He ran the scenarios through his mind again and again and started thinking of all the complications, all the problems. I'll need some time. You have time, Titania encouraged him. I'll make some lunch. You get your head on straight. Titania got up to go make food, and Blemish beamed at the prospect of food to quell his growling stomach. He then realized how empty the house felt now. Where were those elves? And where was Grognar? Titania, where is everyone? Jennifer and Mariel are getting herbs that Philip recommended. They're not far from the cabin, and they'll be back soon. Grognar is back in town working on, well, whatever he wants, and Aenor will be back tomorrow night to check on your condition. I imagine Philip will be with him. Blemish detected the resentment in Titania's voice when she spoke of Grognar, and he fidgeted a little. He remembered the night the two had fought, and wondered if perhaps he could ask about it. Before he could come to a conclusion, Titania returned with some kind of rice and sliced meat on top of it. She handed it to Blemish and sat down on She handed it to Blemish and sat down as Blemish wolfed it down, desperate to calm his howling stomach. "Thank you," he explained. "Well, you're welcome," Titania smiled. She then reached for that Bible on her drawer top and opened it up. She held it open and then looked carefully at Blemish. "You can say no to this, but would you like me to teach you how to read this?" "You can teach me to read?" Blemish asked, nearly gagging. "Well, I'll try, if you'll let me," Titania shrugged. Blemish slowly lowered his face and fidgeted with his food. Blemish said little else, as if his mind was struggling to rationalize something within his own head. Titania gazed at him patiently. "If you don't want me to, I won't be disappointed." No, I don't know what to say," Blemish finally confessed. "Miss Titania, I do not wish to trouble you further." "You're not troubling me, but you attacked your mate for me almost a week ago," he pointed out. Titania paused and suddenly blushed. "My what? You think Grognar and I..." No, that's not the case at all," Titania cried. "Grognar was my friend from before the Cataclysm. I knew him from a long time ago, and we helped each other out after our changes in new life. He's certainly not my mate." "Well, okay, but even if he's not, you still..." Blemish's voice trailed off. "I am a blemish on your life, as I am on existence." "You stop that," Titania snapped, gripping Blemish firmly. "Blemish, you are not a blemish on my or anyone's life." Blemish felt a shiver run down his back at her touch, and he bit his lip forcefully to stop himself from crying again. "But you and Grognar, we'll work it out. It's not because of you, I promise. You're not the reason Grognar and I are upset with each other. We're just... How do I put this? We're two friends having an argument." Titania choked on the word friend. Were she and Grognar still friends? Yeah, she reasoned. They had to be, even if it didn't feel like it. A part of her couldn't bring herself to think that she'd lose a friend over this. Blemish trembled slowly and with discomfort. "What's wrong?" "Miss Titania, I want to ask a favor," he asked. Titania nodded. "What do you need?" The other day I saw Mariel and her mother doing something very warm with each other, very intimate, where they wrapped their arms around each other and held up each other in sort of an embrace. And so I tried to imitate that after you defeated the orc." "Yes?" "I'm not certain how, but could you show me how to do that?" he asked. "I'd like to share that feeling with you, please." He stammered and started like a shy child telling his parent why he'd done something wrong. Titania simply smiled with a blush on her face and nodded. "So you're saying you want a hug?" She reached her arms around Blemish and gently pulled him into her, squeezing him against her gently, but with enough firmness that he felt her. Blemish's eyes began to water as he wrapped his own arms around Titania, his hands trembling. He'd never felt this before, he was sure of it. And yet, despite that assurance, there was a familiarity to it. Did he once have this before? Before the Inquisition? The Inquisition! What would they say if they saw this? It's shameful enough that he was rescued by non-humans, but to actually exchange intimate physical contact with one, to actually, what did Titania call it, hug? How would they feel about him hugging a demon? The fear drove him to start to resist, to start to push away. But then he felt her warm body, and the relaxing sensation, and for the first time in a very long time, Blemish put aside any thoughts of the Inquisition as he nestled himself into the embrace. Josiah's eyes were closed, but he was not sleeping. He was sitting on his throne, his fingers resting on his warhammer, and he was thinking. Normally, an orc's mental capacity is limited. They were designated to very specific and assigned tasks because it's difficult for orcs to handle more than one or two tasks or roles at once. For example, an orc that is taught how to cook will specialize in that field and do it to the best of his abilities, but the likelihood of him learning another skill is slim to none without him giving up his mental understanding of cooking. For this reason, orcs are often called the most stupid of races, but they make up for this mental deficiency in other ways. They are impervious to magic. All orcs have a natural affinity for combat, and they are a very fertile race that can reproduce rapidly and easily. They are by no means weak despite their weaker minds. But Josiah, like all high orcs, is special. A high orc has gifts in leadership and planning. They are on a higher mental level than their peers, capable of rationalizing, plotting, and thinking things through. In Jasai's case, she's even outwitted some very clever peoples. How else could she have expanded and maintained Orcshire's lands for the past 8 years? He has pushed back the kingdom of Caloran to the south. He was continuing to press north into the Valimar Republic, and despite the Queen of Catan Tangare beyond the northwestern mountains had expressed several desires to eliminate him and his warband, she'd not pressed into Orkshire. Now, with Sarandal across the sea waiting for him, Orkshire was poised to grow even larger. With more sex slaves to take to increase their numbers, more resources to replenish his armies, and with more people to dominate, his orc world was growing even stronger. So why did this Inquisition brat bother him so? Why did knowing he was guarding by the mountain demon unnerve him?
It makes no sense,
he sneered. You wanted me? Jasai opened his eye to see Grognar standing in his hall, glaring up at him darkly.
You failed to bring me the boy.
I tried reasoning with her, but she's immovable. If you think you can get better results, you go see her yourself, Grognar snorted darkly.
I'm not sure if you did everything you could, Grognar.
What do you want from me, Jasai? Grognar finally snarled. There's nothing else you could do to me at this point. You have my family, you have my business. What else can you take from me?
Nothing else?
Jasai asked curiously.
I highly doubt that. I'm sure there's more that I can wrench out of you if I just find the right way to twist.
Grognar grimaced, but he himself felt rather confident that Jasai had done all he could. What else could he do now to him?
Hija, Morga!
2 large orcs, one being Grognar's own father, hurried over to Jasai's side. He shouted something at them in the orcish language, and the 2 grunted, running off to go do as they were told. Jasai then glared at Grognar, who was utterly confused, but before he could ask what he was doing, there was a loud scream. Grognar looked up to see a lovely elvish woman being dragged into the hall with long blonde hair and rags for a dress. She was exhausted, dirty, and her face was filled with fear. In Hija's clutches was a younger girl with large feet for her size, hairy toes, and large ears. She was screaming and kicking, but with no avail.
Mom! Sarah!
Grognar cried, trying to go to his mother and sister.
Ethan!
Sarah screamed.
You said a moment ago that I'd already done all I could. There was nothing more I could take from you,
Jasai explained.
I've made your sister a mine worker with the other slaves, and your mother, though a sex slave for reproduction, she has yet to be bedded with any of my underlings. Trust me, keeping them off of her has been very difficult.
You bastard! Grognar snarled furiously, his fist trembling.
But that changes tomorrow night. I will take her to my chambers then. And as for your sister, a halfling child isn't much good for mine work. Too needy and just another mouth to feed. I'll just remove her. The executioner's been getting bored lately. All of this I will do. If the boy and the demon are not brought to me by then, I don't care how you do it, Grognar, but you will bring that assassin boy to me.
I tried! I swear to you I've tried, but Titania won't be reasonable.
Then you kill her. Is that monster's life worth more than theirs?
Jasai demanded.
It's time for you to decide what's most important to you, Grognar.
Don't listen to him, Ethan!
Ethan's mother cried, fighting the restraints around her wrist.
It doesn't matter what happens. Don't give this pig what he wants.
Jasai turned and grabbed the frightened elf by the jaw and yanked her to face him.
You run your mouth well. I can't wait to try it in other ways.
God damn you, Jessica! The whole room fell silent at the name Grognar had roared. Jasai's eye twitched, and he rounded on Grognar with a look of loathing. His fangs bared. Hija and Morga both stepped back in fear as Jasai was spitting with mad rage.
What did you call me, you fat, bearded fool?
I said your name, you bastard! Your real name! I know you just like to forget it, for the world to pretend that was never who you were. But guess what? I haven't forgotten, and I will always hold that truth over your head, Jessica! Jasai roared and threw his hammer at Grognar, who threw himself out of the way fast. He fell on his hurt ribs, but managed to roll back up to his feet. Josiah was on top of him in an instant, grabbing him by the throat with his fist raised.
Never say that name in my presence. Don't you ever call me that worthless name again. I am Josiah. I am Josiah the Devourer.
Grognar couldn't even choke out a response as he was held down by the venomous and furious Josiah.
For that little stunt, I'll be sure to pay your mother and sister in kind with no short degree of lashings. And as I carve that lesson into their hide, maybe my real name will sink it in for you too. You're a monster. A goddamn monster!
Grognar whimpered through tears as Josiah dropped him to the floor.
You have till tomorrow night, Grognar. You have until tomorrow. Now get out of my sight.
Without another word, Grognar picked himself up and weakly hobbled out of the palace, now more broken and scared than he'd ever been before. Well, and that was chapter 12. Need a drink real quick. Much better. Yeah, doing Josiah's voice is a little rough. I was trying to go for like a doctor, like the Dr. Claw thing from Inspector Gadget. That was kind of the voice I was going for. Are high orcs the ones that got lucky and turned into smart orcs? Yes, they got turned into smart orcs. So basically, we had two things happen in that chapter. Titania is starting to get through to Blemish and reach out to him. Meanwhile, we revealed that Josiah has given a time limit to Grognar to bring him the assassin. And he also has revealed that he used to be a woman named Jessica. As we've revealed, the Cataclysm changed many things. Some people didn't just change their race, they changed sex or age. And so, even though Titania was the first one that we revealed, I didn't want her to just be the only one. So I had others without the story. And I tried to drop some hints along the way, because there were moments in the story, if you notice, where I dropped she pronoun instead of he pronoun when talking about Josiah. Those were little hints. And there was also the fact that Josiah kept mentioning that he had a relationship with Grognar in the past. That's because Josiah was formerly the cheerleader that Ethan, who is Grognar, asked out previously. They were a boyfriend and girlfriend. But after the change and Jessica becoming a high orc, that's kind of what happened. All right, so we'll move on to chapter 3. Oh, no, not chapter 3, chapter 13, I'm sorry. Chapter 13. I wrote chapter 13 on May 7th, 2020. This is an old one. All right. Do you ever think For Honor will have a skill tree like Ghost of Tsushima? No. Anyway. All right, let's move on. Here we go. Mariel stood outside the cabin, watching the sun slowly begin to set in the distance. She loved the sunset, maybe more than she loved any other time of day. It was like watching a subtle and glorious end to something grand. Is that what Josiah's death would feel like? She liked to think so. A gorgeous and hopeful end to something grand and yet terrible. She was so caught up in the moment that she barely heard the shuffling behind her. A small cough led her to turn to see the source of the noise. She saw her mother walking behind her. She was carrying a large bag over her back and a hat on her head, hiding her ears. She looked at Mariel for a long moment, a silent explanation behind her sad smile. "Mom," Mariel asked, "I'm all packed and I'm about to go." "Mom, we talked about this. We can't leave without Mariel." "I want you to listen to me," Jennifer interrupted, placing her hands on her daughter's shoulders. "Don't try to stop me, sweetheart," she said. "I've thought a lot about it, and there's just no other direction for me to go. I'm leaving for Serendal tonight." "But Mom, they need us here. We're going to kill Josiah." "No, dear. They need you here. You're a bard. You're young and filled with a spirit I lost a long time ago," she replied, tears building up in her eyes. "Wait, what?" Mariel asked. "You're leaving alone? Without me? My time is done, Mariel. The era I lived in is the one I belong in, not this one, but you. You have so much to live for, and you see a potential in these people that I no longer can.
Call me bigoted or racist or whatever you want. I won't deny it, but it's a truth I can't escape. I can't adjust to this world the way you did.
Mariel wordlessly tried to protest. She reached out and touched her mom's arm, but did not grab it, nor did she plead. She simply stared a long moment, taking in her mother's expression and determination. There seemed nothing else for it.
I'll miss you, Mom,
Mariel whimpered, tears building up in her own eyes. Jennifer ran to her daughter and hugged her tightly, choking on a sob and shaking her head.
We'll see each other again, someday. Come to Sarandal and find me there. Will you be all right on your own, Mom? You'll need a boat to escape. I'll travel north first into Valimar and take a boat from there to Sarandal. I'll be careful. Trust me, she smiled. But you, Mariel, you make the most of your gifts. And I love you so much.
She kissed her daughter on the cheek and stepped back, tears streaming down her face.
I'll find you, Mom. I promise. I know you will, she choked. You're so much stronger than I am. Your father would be so proud of you.
Mariel's mom paused a moment at the mention of her late husband and then took off her bag. She reached inside and began to shuffle around.
Mom, just a second, dear. I want to give you this.
She finally stood up straight and again was hiding something in her hand.
Turn around, please.
Mariel did so, and as she did, she saw something slip around her neck from behind, and it glimmered in the faint sunlight. As her mother locked it behind her neck, Mariel looked down to see it was a small gold necklace with a gemstone at the bottom carved in the shape of a red blooming rose. She recognized it as her mother's favorite necklace. Her dad gave it to her when they had gotten married, and she hadn't worn it once since the cataclysm. She'd said she'd lost it.
Mom, this is your... I can't wear it anymore, Mariel. It hurts too much to feel around my neck. I want you to wear it now. Think of me fondly, dear. I know I wasn't the best mother to have around these last few years. Mariel, I love you so much, and I was selfishly clinging to the past. I couldn't realize just how beautiful and adventurous you've become. I may not like it, but this is life, and it might just suit you.
Mariel burst into tears and hugged her mother again, sniffling.
I love you too, Mom. I love you too, darling. I truly do, she whispered. And I will see you again.
With a hesitant sob, she turned and started walking to the east, towards the borders of Valimar. Mariel watched her mother go, feeling the weight of her absence sit strongly on her heart and shoulders. She'd not been without her parents since the cataclysm, and now she was finally on her own, able to make her own decisions, and her decision couldn't have been more clear. She would help in any way she could to defeat Josiah and save Orkshire. As she gazed off after her mother, another figure began to make its way up from the southern hill. She squinted hard to make him out, but beamed when she saw it was Grognar, climbing his way up the hillside.
Grognar! It's good to see you, she called.
There was no answer.
Great news! Blemish is almost back to normal. We'll probably be ready to make a move on... Grognar, what's wrong?
Grognar wasn't looking at her as he walked towards the cabin. He had a desperate and wild look in his eye, a man with a mission.
Who's inside?
He asked.
Titania's in her room taking a nap. Philip is giving Blemish a checkup right now. Why? Grognar, what's going on?
She asked. Grognar didn't answer her, but she just walked towards the cabin. She hurried after him and grabbed his elbow, bending down low enough to do it.
Grognar, you're not yourself right now. Do you need to talk?
I need to see Titania now, please. I'm fine. I need to see Titania.
He forced her to let go and hurried inside. At the dining room table, Blemish was sitting with a piece of paper on the desk, and he looked like he was drawing letters, while Philip sat across from him fooling with some concoction. He looked up at Grognar and smiled, but the smile faded as he walked by. "Something wrong, friend?" he asked.
"Yeah, I need to see Titania."
He marched on, and Philip's eyes followed him the whole way back to Titania's bedroom. Mariel ran in and looked at Philip.
"What's gotten into him?" she asked.
"I don't know, but something must have happened in town." Blemish glanced past the two and then went back to his letters. He was focused on getting the hang of these letters. Titania had wanted to teach him how to read and write, and while he was interested, his mind was still going over how to kill Josiah. He didn't want to admit he hadn't come up with anything yet, but time was running out. Grognar closed the door behind him as he saw Titania laying in her bed. She was sound asleep. Her head rested on a large pillow and her armor tossed to the side. Without her armor and with only chest wraps to keep her breasts tied down, it was a fierce reminder that she was indeed female and not a beast. Sometimes Grognar forgot that there was a delicacy behind the fierce ogress, but now he had no time to admire physical traits. He had come for a purpose, and he had to accomplish it. He walked to the bed and kicked it. "Wake up!" Titania opened her eyes wearily and sat up, covering her top with a blanket.
Jesus, Groggy, you gotta wake me now? Ugh. And while I'm in the nude, what's the big deal?
I won't beat around the bush. My mom is to be raped tomorrow night by Josiah, and my sister will be executed.
Titania froze in place. Her eyes fell on Grognar, who was trembling with fear, but his eyes shimmered with determined fury.
You're here to get Blemish again. That's the price for him, isn't it?
Grognar inhaled deeply.
That's the price for them, he agreed.
So why wake me? You know I won't just hand him over, Titania challenged.
I was hoping you'd have come up with a plan now, he grumbled. You said you were going to kill Josiah. Well, are you ready? Do we have a plan?
Titania shook his head.
Blemish isn't fully recovered yet, and even if he was, he hasn't come up with anything,
Titania muttered, leaning forward and bowing her head.
I'm really sorry, Ethan.
Grognar nearly sank to his knees at the news, and he leaned against the bedpost.
I don't know what to do, Titania. I don't. I can't lose my sister, and I can't let my mom be ravaged by that monster.
Titania looked at him carefully for a long moment, and then she sighed deeply. She then stood up and sat down on the floor again, Grognar watching her for a moment. She reached under the bed and pulled out a wooden box. She slid it to Grognar, who put it in his lap. Open that up. Grognar did so, and his breath caught in his throat. Inside was a steel marvel. With a polished finish resting on red linen, it had a wooden handle with an old-fashioned air to it. A 6-shooter revolver sat within the box. A handgun. During the early days of the Cataclysm, everyone who owned a gun used them for self-defense and to wage war on each other. Now, after so long with no way to manufacture more bullets or to maintain them, guns were mostly a rarity now, and were almost never used as weapons as ammo was so sparse and hard to get. Most were sold as antiques or kept as souvenirs. Just looking at this revolver told Grognar it was worth a fortune.
It belonged to my grandfather, who passed it to my dad, who gave it to me a year before the Cataclysm. It's still fully loaded with 6 bullets. A rare find, right?
Why are you showing me this? Grognar asked in disbelief.
It might buy you time, she explained.
Are you kidding? 6 bullets won't be enough to kill Josiah. I get searched any time I go to visit him, and when I do, it's always by his request. If I just barged in, the orcs would know I was armed.
Then offer it as a gift. Trade it for time. It's worth a fortune, and it could be worth something to that stupid orc, Titania offered. Look, either way, I can't use it anymore. My hands are too large to use it properly. One of the curses of being this big.
Well, why not give it to Blemish? Let him shoot Josiah after sneaking in.
Blemish has never held a gun before. We can't afford a novice to attempt to use it in an assassination, Titania argued.
Grognar weighed the option as he raised the gun from the box and inspected it.
You're actually giving this to me.
Grognar, I know our friendship is pretty much trashed, but what's happening to your family isn't right. And I do want to help, and this is the least I can do, she explained. I'm sure you can find a better use for it than letting it just sit in a box.
Grognar held the gun a long time and checked to see that it was indeed loaded. He then thought about the prospect. Offering it to Josiah would be a decent idea. It would be a rare treasure, and Josiah loved those. But would it even mean anything? Josiah would likely take it anyway and celebrate by hacking off his sister's limbs. It wouldn't change anything. He wanted Blemish and Titania. He wanted them for their release. A gun, no matter how valuable, just might not be enough. He looked at Titania as she sat there near naked and quiet. It dawned on him again how feminine she could appear. How vulnerable. Without her armor and weapons sitting on the floor like that, she didn't seem so tall now. Not so frightening. Grognar gripped the pistol tightly as he began weighing the options. 6 shots. One was all he needed. Just one.
Grognar? Titania asked. Grognar looked at Titania with a tearful and savage look.
Our friendship, he whispered. Do you really think it's trashed?
He asked. I don't know, she explained. I can't bring myself to hate you, and I still care about you, but right now it's just hard to trust you, you know?
And yet you gave me a gun.
I know. Maybe I do trust you more than I thought.
I understand.
He nodded, looking back at the gun.
I hoped you might have forgiven me by now.
Ethan, Titania smiled sadly. Of course I forgive you. Grognar closed his eyes and inhaled slowly as he felt tears roll down his cheeks and into his beard, the silence striking him in the heart.
Thank you, David, he whispered. I'm glad to hear that.
Just one bullet is all he needed.
I think I know what to do. Grognar raised the pistol.
And that is the end of chapter 13. And now I need a drink. Excuse me a moment. That's better. I needed that. Whew. Aaron, if gun don't work, use more gun. I love it. Whoa. Yep, the unlucky chapter 13. All right. Well, do we need to do chapter 14 and see if Grognar actually did what we think he did? I think we better do chapter 14, or else y'all might kill me, because I may go to another. Go to another story. Y'all go, no. All right, chapter 14. Here we go. Glad y'all are enjoying this, and I know Aaron's here. Hannah, you still here? You still moderating? Making sure that Hannah's still with us. Yeah, it reminds me of that line from Willy Wonka. The suspense is terrible. I hope it lasts. Looks like Hannah had to go. All right, well, we'll keep going anyway. All right, here we go. Boss! Hija ran in to see Josiah, bending to one knee. Josiah sat on his throne, tapping his knuckle against his knee. His eyes fell on Hija with a glare of annoyance. He growled and bared his teeth.
What is it, Hija? And it better be something good.
Boss, it's Grognar. He brought the boy. Josiah did not expect this news and stood up fast, his eyes filled with suspense as he ran to the front gates to see. Walking slowly down the pathway at the front yard of the palace was Grognar. In front of him, with his hands tied behind his back, was the masked assassin from before. In Grognar's hand, aimed at the back of the assassin's head, was a revolver that Josiah had never seen before. In his other hand was a burlap sack that was stained red at the bottom and was dripping occasionally with a red liquid that had to be blood. When I reached the gate, Josiah crossed his arms.
So it seems you grew a spine. Come, bring him in.
Grognar did not speak, but merely glared daggers at Josiah as he was led inside. Josiah was beaming from ear to ear, like gentle music was playing in his ear, joyous and wonderful. The assassin dead, and he couldn't help but wonder what was in that bag. He'd ask in due time, but first to the matter at hand. As Grognar made it to the middle of the room, he kicked the back of Blemish's legs to force him to kneel down. Blemish let out a grunt as he fell, but said nothing, looking furious and pitiful.
So this is my assassin. Perhaps the Inquisition isn't as dangerous as I first thought.
Josiah laughed.
Sending a boy to kill someone like me. Ridiculous.
Let my mother and sister go, Ragnar snarled. You got what you wanted, now let them go.
Of course, as you wish. I'm not without mercy.
He turned to Hija.
Free the woman. Let them both go.
Hija bowed and ran off to do as he was told. Josiah then turned his attention back to Grognar.
Now don't you feel better? Do tell me how you were able to pry this child from the clutches of that demon Titania.
Grognar hissed and held out the tied burlap sack, dripping still. She gave me a pistol that she said I could trade for my family. And I shot her when her guard was down. I cut off her head and put it in this bag, and you can look if you want. Blemish winced behind his mask and bowed his head painfully at the message. Josiah burst into howls of laughter at the news and beat his fist against his knee.
How devious. Perfect. Perfect. The irony of it. She offers you a way out, a bargaining chip, and you turn it on her instead. Maybe you should have been an orc, not a dwarf.
The music of victory seemed to fill Josiah, with no even more laughter.
If only you'd brought back the 2 escaped slaves, too. But no matter. They're of little consequence. Please, might I see the head of the demon?
Grognar held out the bag and threw it to Josiah, who caught it easily. He weighed it in his hand and laughed once more as he began to open it.
You've done well, Grognar. Very impressive, Josiah scoffed. And all it cost you was your loyalty and friendship.
Among other things, Grognar grumbled. Josiah snarled as he struggled to open the bag. The knot was rather tight.
This is quite a knot. No matter.
He reached down by his throne and grabbed a dagger to cut the top off. Grognar looked away quickly, covering his mouth and nose, making Josiah laugh again.
What? A weak stomach? Can't even look at the head you decapitated without feeling ill.
Josiah asked as he tore the dagger through the bag.
No. I'd rather not inhale any of what comes out of that bag.
Josiah didn't have time to ask what he meant. The moment the bag top opened, there was a loud puff as red spores burst from the bag and clouded the immediate area. Josiah let out a shout of shock as he chucked the bag away into a crowd of orcs who had run in hearing the shout. They too all cried out and began hacking and coughing from the fumes of the bag. From within fell a rolled-up pile of red spices and herbs that seemed like they were bubbling and fizzling with red liquid, releasing a stream of red gaseous spores.
What is this?
Josiah cried, staggering from the smell, his body shaking. He felt dizzy. His head was swimming. That's just phase 1, Grognar snapped, pulling a knife and cutting Blemish's hands free.
Phase what?
A friendly alchemist cooked that up for me. The herbs don't react well together and create a fume that's toxic if inhaled. Blemish jumped up and put on his mask. It was phase 1. Just as Josiah was starting to rise to his feet again, coughing and shaking terribly as his vision was blurred, he heard and felt the force of a massive explosion. Rocks and debris flew in all directions, and Josiah, as well as a large majority of his orcs, were thrown to the ground from the concussive blast.
And that was phase 2,
Grognar smirked. A massive hole in the wall was letting in the tiniest trickle of dawn sunlight as the night was starting to end. Through the hole ran a young man in a black cloak and wearing a strange mask with a beak-like front. He appeared like an old image of a plague doctor from the ancient world, but Grognar recognized the laughter of Philip behind that mask.
Damn! This was awesome! I do love phase 2!
He hollered happily. As he ran through the hole, he jumped over fallen orc bodies, drawing a sword from his side and a small pouch of something equally nefarious in his free hand. But it was the figure coming in behind him that shocked the orcs more. Titania, with her head very much still attached, and her eyes glaring daggers at the orcs before her, drew her greatsword from her back holster and roared as she charged to engage them. Josiah's attention was brought quickly back to the present as Blemish drew his own blades, a sword and a dagger.
Filthy traitor!
Josiah roared. Blemish jumped at Josiah, who struggled to his feet, still delirious from the poisonous gases. He grabbed his heavy hammer to defend, but screamed as the sword dug into his arm. With a wrenching jerk, he swung his arm at Blemish, sending him sprawling backwards and rolling back into a guard position. Josiah didn't stay to continue this engagement. Stumbling away, he ran for the upper level of the palace to escape. Blemish pursued quickly. Grognar fell back to aid Titania, who was a force of nature in her own right, overpowering orcs who hadn't succumbed to the poison and roaring furiously in the face of the dying.
Damn it! Damn it all, I was tricked!
Josiah snarled, stumbling into his chambers and locking the door behind him. He coughed heavily as the poison was continuing to affect his vision and senses.
I'll kill that Grognar. I'll butcher him like the pig he is. Somehow I...
He roared in agony as he felt a sharp pain in his shoulder. Blemish had kicked open the door and had buried his dagger into Josiah's shoulder. He snarled and swung behind him. Blemish tried to hang on, but the pain in his side was starting to act up again, and he started to lose his grip. He jumped off the struggling Josiah as he swung his hammer behind him. Blemish deflected under the blow and rolled aside, swinging his kick into Josiah's calf. Josiah buckled from the strike as Blemish struck at his exposed hip. It was then Josiah began to understand why he was so afraid of Blemish, why the assassin struck such fear into him. Why had the neighboring countries only perturbed him from time to time, but this assassin had driven him mad with worry, and now the truth was known with each strike of the sword. This assassin would be his death. Whereas his foes across the map were interested in fighting his armies, he would always be able to overcome and persevere. But this archangel was a shadow within a shadow. He was untouchable and yet always present. Josiah swung with all his might, but like water, Blemish would move through and around the strike to plunge his dagger into another exposed spot. He had been right to fear the assassin, right to be worried. But Blemish was feeling the weight of his own wounds. It was becoming hard to keep up, hard to keep the pain down. He was slowing, and soon Josiah would take advantage of that. As he pirouetted to evade a downward swing, he stumbled as the pain hit him hard. Josiah saw it and turned his hammer to strike down the boy.
Die, you little scum!
She hit like a tank and with the speed of a horse. Titania slammed her full body into Josiah, and the two titans crashed into the stone wall, chipping plaster and concrete from the sides. Josiah roared and struck Titania in the face, which he retaliated with a knee to his gut. The two giants grunted and struck with furious ferocity. Titania swung her sword at Josiah's head, and it was all he could do to raise his hammer to block. Blemish grabbed his own sword again and joined in the fight. If Titania was here, that meant the orcs downstairs were under control or dead, but the danger wasn't past. Reinforcements would arrive soon, and Josiah had to be dead by the time they did. The poison was making him weaker and slower. Titania's brute force had him against the wall and barely able to fight back. Blemish would harass and slash at any exposed point, but neither seemed to be aiming to kill. Blemish took a wild swing, which Titania caught with her sword and parried. Blemish then jumped behind Josiah and plunged his knife into his shoulder blade, locking it back. Josiah screamed as Blemish held the lock and forced the brute to his knees.
You vermin! Filthy rats! Josiah bellowed. I'll slaughter you! I'll rally my orcs and gut you like the pigs you are!
Pigs, are we? Josiah looked to the door to see Grognar standing there, glaring at Josiah through remorseless eyes. I've known you a long time, Josiah, and never once did I think you were a pig. A monster, yes, but never a pig.
Grognar, listen, let's discuss this. Your family is free. Call this off, and I'll let you go too. You can all leave Orkshire.
The thing is, Grognar continued sadly, maybe a pig is a better description for you. An ugly, gluttonous pig. Josiah was fuming and foaming at the mouth as he tried to wrench himself free of Blemish and Titania.
Grognar, no. Ethan, think of what we had. I know it can't work now, but we were together once. Remember? I was your Jessica.
Jessica's dead, Josiah, Grognar explained coldly. You were right the other day. I shouldn't have called you that anymore. When you clearly killed that girl. Or maybe there never even was a Jessica. Maybe there was just always Josiah, and Jessica was just a name. It was just a game you played while you were human. Josiah said nothing to that. He simply fumed furiously, and Grognar pulled out the revolver. Sorry, David, Grognar said, looking to Titania. I promise. One bullet is all I need.
You bop!
Grognar stared at Josiah's head as it shot back and then fell forward, a massive hole in the forehead and out the back of his head. He slumped forward, and Blemish allowed his body to drop, pulling out his blade. Grognar dropped the gun with shaking fingers, and he sank to his knees. He'd never killed anyone before, and now he just executed the monster who'd been tormenting him for the last 8 terrible years. Ethan, Titania asked, are you all right? No. And yes, Grognar answered breathlessly. It was like the whole world was crashing on him at once. He had to slap his own hands against himself for a moment to remind himself he was still able to feel anything. The pain of the last 8 years was now slipping from his shoulders. Relief, like a pouring torrent, fell upon his body. It's over. For Josiah, yes, Blemish nodded, but I'm afraid the work is not yet over. I still have more to do. And thus, we come to the end of chapter 14. What did you think of chapter 14, everyone? Did you enjoy that one? Did you like chapter 14? Chapter 14 was a fun one, I must say. So, do y'all want to hear another new epic chapter, or would you like to hear something different? Would you like a brief break from that, since we finally got that out of the way? There's still more to the story. There's a total of, how many chapters do I have here? 31. I have 31 chapters here. So, we've still got a ways to go. We're actually about halfway. Oh, you honestly thought that he killed Titania? That was the goal. I wanted y'all to think that. I pulled a fast one. Y'all want a break? Y'all want a short break? We'll come back to it if y'all want, but I think we should take a short break. Let's take a short break from New Epic. Let's read something else. Let's see. What can I read? What's something good? What's something really good? Can't read Death Diary. I do that already. I don't want to read another series story right now because that'll get us too caught up in it. Let's see. No. I read that one on the channel too. I'm surprised at some of the stuff that I've already read. It's a little odd, isn't it? No. Can't read that one. I had forgotten. Oh, what about this one? No, I've already done that. I read that previously. Oh, here's one. Let's read this one. Let's read Loch Lomond. Okay, so this one I wrote on July 1st of last year, so it's relatively new. It is a short story. Have you ever heard the song Loch Lomond? It's a Scottish dirge. It's a Scottish song, and I looked up the history behind the song. It's actually beautiful. Look up the song Loch Lomond. It's really good, and I'll even put it into chat if y'all want. One second, let me put that in chat. It's called Loch Lomond. There. So look that up. Loch Lomond, beautiful song, absolutely beautiful song, but it has a history to it. And based on the history, I wanted to do a short story based on the song. So here is the story. Now, bear with me. My Scottish accent isn't great, and I have to do two different ones, so bear with me. He awoke with the rising of the sun, that dreaded and terrible sun. The young man sat up slightly, squinting as he looked up from his mat. He felt weak and tired, and so very thirsty. The floor was hard and cold, and the cell bars that surrounded him only made him feel more alone. The barred window that revealed the rising of the sun glared back at him, taunting him with that terrible sight of daylight. He wanted it to go down, to not rise, to stay away. Let the day not come. The young man crawled up, trying to rise to his feet as if to cover the window and let the old man hear him sleep.
Don't waste your time, lad,
the old man whispered hoarsely.
I'm awake. I've been for a while yet.
The young man frowned and sat back down. You need sleep, old man.
Nay,
the young man chuckled with a throaty cough. His white graying hair fell down just beyond his neck, and his beard, unshaved but still regal, framed his cheeks and chin. He had a weary face, lines on it, and evident bags under his eyes. His deep blue eyes were the same as the young man's, though they were not related. He'd only met this man a few weeks ago when he was brought there to Castle Carlisle. The old man coughed again, and the younger reached forward as if to help him, though the old man waved him off.
Nay, he said, I don't need sleep. I want to watch the sunrise.
The young man sat in silence. I wish it wouldn't, the young man asked.
Aye, but it does whatever we want it to or not,
the old man croaked, never pulling his eyes away from the glowing dawn, drawing closer. the sky glowing an orange color. The young man looked at the older man, the light reflecting in his eyes. They held so much more life than his face seemed to suggest.
Or could all things be so easily fixed?
Talking in riddles again, the young man asked with an edge of good humor.
When you get to be my age, it becomes something out of habit, the old man winked.
The young man chuckled and sat silent for a long while.
Lad, did I tell you Loch Lomond?
He had. The old man had told him many times since he'd been thrown in here with him. He knew more about Loch Lomond than he'd ever cared to remember now, thanks to this old man. And yet, he wanted to hear it again. He had to hear it again. Nay, I can't say I have, the young man answered. The old man's eyes twinkled and shimmered as if with tears.
'Tis a loch you could never forget, lad. You go beyond the broch and come into the banks at this hour, and you'll see the sun shining bright on the surface of the water. Almost spring now, eh? You'll see the flowers blooming and springing up from round the banks like a crown. And the still water. Ah, lad, 'tis like a bed for the sun. You could stare in the wake and get lost forever. The mountains around it sit like to guard her, they do. Aye, and only God himself touch her, lad. Only God's got the right. The water, lad, cool to the touch and simple too, but each drop more precious than diamond, more lovely than crystal.
He would go on like this for some time. The young man knew that. He'd heard the old man lament and go on and on about the lake so often. He could probably recite the whole prose by heart, but he knew that the lake isn't what the man was building up to. And there, lad, there, me and my true love, 'tis where we met and where we want to go again. Aye, she a fine lass.
Finest one she ever laid eyes on,
the old man cackled.
Aye, I was half your age then. Was coming down the Bin Lomond. It was just about this time, this hour, and there she was, lad. Hair red like fire, face alight with freckle, and eyes like plucked from a spring morn.
The old man chuckled.
Her hair ain't quite that red now. Age does that to you, you know.
Aye, but she still has the eyes, right?
Aye, how do you know that?
The old man teased, and the young man smiled at him. He'd heard the story before, of course, but he had to let the old man tell it again. Tell it again and again, as often as he could. Well, last thing a lass leaves behind is her eyes, right? The young man quoted. The old man nodded knowingly and sighed long and low.
Aye, lad, that they do. And don't you forget it.
He smiled weakly and then went back to looking at the sun.
Well, we hide among the glen, run to the hills. We watch the moon rise in the gloaming. We chase each other up and down the hills, rolling in grass, and we laugh until the sky lightened with starlight.
How long?
How long you do that for? About every day, lad.
How'd to get old after a while, aye? The young man asked. The old man stared at him a long moment and shook his head.
It was heaven, lad. And heaven don't ever age, he whispered.
The young man shrugged. Can't say I really understand.
You ain't ever known love before? The old man asked.
The young man shook his head. When he joined Bonnie Prince Charlie in his attempt to overthrow the English king, he'd not left anyone but his mum behind. He never knew his da, and his mum was in fine health. He never found time to find a bonny lass. The Battle of Culloden Moor had practically put an end to any thoughts of love or romance. When he'd been dragged away from the battlefield and thrown into this putrid cell, his mind was far away from thoughts of romance. Until the third day, when they tossed the old man in with him. He'd been at the battle too, an old veteran, and all that was on his mind, apparently, was his lass at Loch Lomond. At first, the young man had wanted him to stop speaking, to give it a rest, but over time he'd grown to love hearing the old man talk about his wife back home, about his adventures, his games, his joys, and his regrets. And then, the old man paused a moment and turned back to the sun.
You'll get your chance, lad, when you get back.
The young man frowned and moved closer to the old man. And when I do, I'll take her to Loch Lomond, aye, the young man teased. The old man just turned and looked at him, and a soft smile spread across his feet, like an old lion, an old king weary from rule and smiling at the innocence presented to him.
Aye, lad, you do that.
As they sat, the sound of iron doors clanked open could be heard. The old man didn't turn his eyes away, but the young man rounded, rising to his feet. 3 men marched into the dungeon and stopped at the cell. They had a disdainful look about them, and they turned their nose up at both of the prisoners. One opened the cell door and glared at the old man. Let's go. You have an appointment with the gallows. The young man jumped to his feet and stared towards the guard, but all three raised their weapons fast, blades pointed at him. You have been given your pardon and are due for release in a week. Do not throw away your good fortune by doing something foolish. You'll have him over to my dead body, the young man snarled. Nay, lad, calm yourself, the young man croaked, slowly rising to his feet, showing an unmistakable strength in his body as he stood on firm legs. He turned to face the young man and reached out his withered hands, placing them on the young man's shoulders as his teary eyes found his. I can't leave you. You don't have to die, the young man started to sob. We gotta go home. You gotta get home to Loch Lomond. You gotta see her again. You gotta. Aye, lad, aye. We're going home, the young man agreed, tears rolling down his face. But you'll take the high road, and I'll take the low. And I'll be in Scotland afore you, he winked, and the young man grit his teeth, fighting in vain to hold back tears. But me and my true love, we'll never meet again on the bonny banks of Loch Lomond. That's enough, the English guard barked. Let's go. Now, oh, have a heart, the young man barked. The old man shook his head and turned away, hobbling towards the guards, his eyes firm but sad. He stood straight and tall like a statue, his body unwavering. I'll see you there, the young man cried to the old man. I'll find you there at the loch. I'll see you on the banks. The old man cast one last look back at the young man, and he smiled wearily at the boy. Aye, lad. Don't be late. A year ago to the day, the young man stands on the banks of a loch he'd never seen but had known so very well. The birds sing on the wind and the water ebbs and flows. The wild flowers dance in the breeze along the bank. The sun on the water rests sleepily as the still surface acts as the bed for it. The young man stares out at the water for a long while, the words of the old man speaking to him even now, and as he gazes out at the water, a subtle movement catches his eye. He turns and sees a woman. She's older, lines on her face, told of her age. Her hair, once red, had streaks of gray and orange in its beautiful locks. But when her eyes turned to see him, the young man's breath caught in his throat. The old man had been honest. Her eyes were like pieces of a spring sky staring right at him. The voice of the old man again sang of her, and the young man felt tears in his eyes as he heard the ballad. With shaking legs, the young man walked towards the bonny woman on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. All right, and that is Loch Lomond. Hope you guys enjoyed that. That is a sad one, but one I really, really like. I really like that story. And before I go back to reading New Epoch, because I will read you another chapter if you'd like, but before I do, I'd like to read you a poem. I'd like to read this short poem called Ode to a Flame. This is a very short poem. I wrote it, oh God, when did I write this? Ode to a Flame. When did I write this? April 20th, 2020. Ooh, this is an old one. Tell me, guys, what you think of this poem, because this is an older one, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Ode to a Flame by the Raven Knight. Thy fiery song intrudes the night, and thy embers provoke a flickering light. How brilliant are the flames that dance, that ignite my ire and induce trance. Power that I dare not conceive, illuminate the heart this chilling eve, and claim me with your tongues of flame, and my heart shall never be the same. Thank you. Thank you. I need a refill on my water. I will be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Hold on. And no, do not ask me to sing Loch Lomond. I don't know the lyrics well. But yeah, go listen to the song after the stream. Please do. Please do. Great song. Did it bring tears to your eyes? I know it didn't bring it into yours, Hannah. Dry as dirt. One cold son of a bitch. That was actually a joke that me and my brother told in the Lord of the Rings movie, in the first one, The Fellowship of the Ring, when Gandalf falls and everyone thinks he's dead and everyone else is crying and all that stuff. I remember Frodo walking away like aimlessly, and Aragorn has to call him Frodo, and and he turns around, and when you see his face, there are no tears. He looks sad, but there's no tears. And I remember thinking, wow, no tears for Gandalf? He is one dry as dust, those eyes. He is one cold son of a bitch. I'm sorry. I just always thought that was funny. All right, well, I'll keep my promise. I read you an extra story and a poem, so now I think it's time that we switch over to New Epoch again. Here we go. I believe we are on chapter 15. Nah, she's not cold and heartless. I was making a joke. Hannah's a good person, at heart. Come on, Hannah. I love you. Come on. Don't be mad. Anyway, all right, so y'all ready for chapter 15? Once I see someone say, yes, I'm ready for chapter 15 in chat, I will begin reading. Let me tell you, doing 2 different Scottish accents at the same time was rough. My throat's going to hate me tomorrow. How dare you say nice things about me? Oh, Hannah, I know. I shouldn't. Hannah Online is a chaotic goblin. All right, let's do chapter 15. Y'all ready? Here we go. April 1st, 2020. The sky was starting to light up. Grognar made his way up the hill, nursing a sore shoulder and aching legs. It was like he'd been walking for days. But perhaps that wasn't too far-fetched. The citadel of Orkshire was in turmoil, and it was taking everything he had to try and get some semblance of peace in place. It's been a week since Josiah was killed, and with his death, the orcs had lost their leader and had little idea of what to do anymore. Do they continue to fight or flee? Some ran away from the citadel, and some savagely started searching for people to butcher. A few just fainted. Whatever the case, the orcs were losing their grip on things. The humans, elves, halflings, and dwarves still living in the citadel at the time were both celebrating and hiding. It was a confusing period for the people, unsure of how to feel about the death of their tyrant. Is this what freedom feels like? Grognar finally reached the top of the hill and saw the cabin, sitting silently and stoic among the trees. Not far from it was a tall tree with lovely red leaves drifting from it like crimson snowflakes. Under its branches, leaning against the trunk, was the large Titania, bandages wrapped around her right arm and her knee, and a small scar just below her neck where an orc had caught her with a dagger. She had one leg propped up and her hand resting on a knee, but her other leg was laid out flat with a head resting on it. It was the head that her other hand was caressing with gentle strokes. Blemish lay there, his head on her lap, breathing softly, almost soundlessly. His mask was off, and Grognar felt surprised at how young he looked. Was this child really the assassin that had helped Josiah? Titania was humming to Blemish as she stroked his head, and she was smiling. Grognar could scarcely believe that these two were fierce warriors. "Am I, interrupting?" he asked. Titania's eyes shot up to see Grognar, and she stopped immediately, blushing. We were practicing our reading skills, and his eyes were tired, so I let him rest his head on my... Shut up, Titania grumbled. "No judgment. After what you two did for me in this city, I don't care what you two do with your spare time," Grognar chuckled. He looked up at the beautiful red tree and smiled. "Why haven't I seen this tree like this before?" "I don't know," Titania answered honestly. "I don't remember it ever doing this. Or maybe I just never noticed." The two were silent a long time, taking in the reality of their new peace, their ability to appreciate the beautiful things. Your parents are alive, Grognar pointed out. "Maybe you should go see them now?" Titania didn't respond to that offer. She just looked up at the tree and smiled. "I'm glad they're fine, really." "You don't seem happy, Titania." "Sure, things are crazy right now, but they'll die down. We'll set things right." "I am happy, Groggy," Titania answered. "It's just, I don't remember the last time I felt this way. Felt at ease. I want to enjoy it while it lasts." "You think worse is to come?" Grognar asked. "Can't see how it gets worse than Josiah." "No, but
Then how much do we really know about the world? Titania asked. She gently eased her leg out from under blemishes and lay his head on the grass. She stood up again and stretched her shoulders and legs. We've been stuck in this citadel for so long. Maybe we've only just started to see the darkness this world has to offer. But then maybe we've only seen a glimpse of the light. What's beyond those mountains? What's beyond the sea? I want to know, Groggy.
So you're planning to leave?
Mariel still needs a bodyguard to help her on her path. I can at least go with her some of the way.
Where is she anyway? Grognar asked.
She's helping Aenor in treating the wounded, Titania answered. Philip said he had to go and sell some wares to make a profit off his trip, but he'll be back in a few days.
Grognar nodded and stroked his long beard as he walked back towards the cabin, pulling out his pipe from his coat. Under the pocket where he kept his pipe, he felt the weight of the pistol he'd used to kill Josiah, the gun that Titania had given him.
You know, it feels like it all started with you, Titania, he muttered. You gave me the gun to kill Josiah. You chose to save Blemish, the only one who could seal the deal with killing Josiah. You were the brute force that held off the Orc reinforcements while Blemish fought. I don't know where I'd be if you hadn't helped.
If you're about to confess undying love to me, I'm ripping off your beard by the root, Titania warned.
No, that's not my point. Titania, I want to thank you. If it weren't for you and Blemish and Philip, if all of you hadn't helped me, I never could have put Josiah down, Grognar explained.
I'm surprised you did it, Josiah admitted. I mean, once upon a time, she was your girlfriend.
Jessica was dead and has been for a long time, Grognar answered. Josiah was all she was anymore, and now Jessica can rest in peace. Titania smiled and rubbed her scar. Now we can start rebuilding, I think.
And how's your family doing? Titania asked.
Grognar sat down on the cabin porch and shrugged with a satisfied smile. He puffed the pipe, and Titania stood next to him watching.
Mom and little sis are happy as can be. They're so grateful to be free of Josiah, and I've never felt so praised. Dad, well, he doesn't know how to feel. He tried coming home once or twice, but he never stays long because none of us say a thing to him.
Serves him right, Titania growled. Sure you don't want me to pay him back for anything?
Nah, living with who he is, that's punishment enough, Grognar snarled. The only thing that really scares me right now is what happens if the orcs rally. If they come back in force.
They won't, or at least they'll find it difficult, Titania assured him. Orcs are specialized creatures. They learn a single skill and stick to it. None are suited to tactical thinking or leadership, and while maybe 4 or 5 might rally together, it'd be hard to get a whole horde to think and fight together. They're like sheep. They tend to follow a leader if they can. Otherwise, they're prone to wander off.
You know, I feel sorry for them. I mean, they were human once after all, Grognar pointed out.
We all were, Titania answered. Most of us, anyway.
But we still had to kill them. Even though they were human.
Death is part of life, Titania answered darkly, though Grognar could sense resentment in her tone. They say that in ogre bands, or so I'm told. An ogre is considered an adult when they kill their first foe in battle, and then they grow a second horn and become official warriors, or at least that's the rumor.
I don't want to kill people. Even if they're monsters now, I don't, Grognar replied. But I think that's the world... That's the world we live in. It forces our hand. What I don't understand, though, is what is it all for? Is this God's idea of a joke?
No, I don't believe that. There's a reason for it all, but I doubt it's our place to know the answer, Titania snapped. All we can do is walk the path set before us.
And that's it. What's next for us, Titania? We're not leaders. We can't lead and run Orkshire. The people here barely know you, and I'm just a blacksmith, not some governor or king.
You won't lead.
Titania and Grognar both turned to see Blemish sitting up, his mask back on his face and his eyes turned to Titania and Grognar.
Blemish? What do you mean? Titania asked. My mission was to kill Josiah so that his tyranny would end, but with no leader in its place, the Inquisition will now step in.
The Inquisition is coming, Grognar grasped. You mean they're...
Yes, I imagine within the next few days, Inquisition forces will arrive to get rid of the last of the orcs and help bring peace back to Orkshire. But this place is home to elves, dwarves, halflings, and other non-humans, Titania argued. What will the Inquisition do about them? For now, their priority will be the orcs. They won't harm the other non-humans, at least not yet.
There was a robotic, almost pre-recorded manner to the way Blemish replied, but Titania detected a hint of frustration in the last part of the explanation, like it wasn't something he was proud to say.
There is nothing to be done about it. In the end, Orkshire is simply a small piece of land stuck between 3 other nations. Those three nations will invade and try to take Orkshire for themselves because there is no leadership here. Orkshire will become a war zone. If the Inquisition takes command, we can put it under their protection and thus prevent that inevitability.
So it's protection? We trade a tyrant for an authoritarian theocracy?
Grognor spat. The Inquisition will appoint a governor to maintain control and peace. The people will not be harmed, Blemish explained. His eyes then turned to Titania. But they will purge the orcs and ogres that they find. So in other words, I need to get while the getting's good, Titania asked. Blemish hung his head shamefully. Sorry.
I need to go inform the town. The Citadel needs to know what's coming and be prepared, Grognor grumbled, standing up. Sorry I can't join you two for supper.
I didn't invite you to supper.
True enough, then invite me to breakfast tomorrow. You fat bastard, big-breasted wench!
Grognor shouted back. He then turned on his heels and hurried back down the mountain while Titania shook her head with a smirk. Blemish walked to her, taking off his mask again, a puzzled look on his face. Why do you two insult each other like that? Are you still mad at each other? No, it's hard to explain, Blemish. When we were both growing up together before the Cataclysm, it was just the way we guys sometimes talked. It doesn't seem all that friendly to me. No, I suppose it doesn't, Titania giggled. But it is getting to be about supper time. Let's head in and we get something to eat. Titania, can I ask you something? Blemish asked, grabbing Titania's hand as she started to walk in. Titania paused and looked back at the boy, blinking. What's wrong? Blemish opened his mouth as if to say something, but then shut it again, concern in his voice and in his stance. He teetered on both feet a moment, like a shy child, and then finally spoke. Do you think I'm good? He asked. What? Am I a good person? Of course you are. Why would you ask that? Titania asked. Don't make it sound so easy, please, Blemish argued. I've always done what I thought was good, but were the things I thought were good actually good things? What if I did something that I thought was right and it wasn't? Does that mean I'm bad? What makes me a good person to you? Why do you think it's so obvious? Titania frowned a moment and knelt down. What's bothering you? I don't know what to do, Titania, he whispered, shuffling his feet. I just want to know, when I decide what to do, how will I know it's good? Titania smiled softly and put a hand on Blemish's head in a matronly way. Good people can make bad decisions. That happens. I don't think anyone is inherently good. I think we all choose whether or not we act righteously. And how do I know if what I do is good? Because the Inquisition says one thing is good, but then you might say it's not. Titania looked at the beautiful tree behind Blemish and turned him around to face it. What do you think of this tree? It's red. No, don't describe it, silly. What do you feel? Do you feel this tree is good? She asked. Blemish thought about it a moment, thinking, feeling, taking in the tree. I think so. Why do you think it's good? I don't know. I just guess it is. I feel like it is. Would you be upset if I cut it down? Don't cut it down, he cried. He suddenly gasped at his own outburst. Where did that come from? Why did he care? It's just a tree. It has no value. Or does it? I'm not going to cut it down. But see? This tree's nothing. There are millions of trees on this mountain, but this one is special to you. It's good. It didn't do anything to be good, but you recognize good in it. That's how I see goodness, Blemish. You might have done some good things and bad things before, but that's not why I see good in you. You're good because, well, that's how God made you to be. Blemish stared at the tree a long time, even after Titania stood back up to walk inside. He simply stared at its beautiful red leaves and the drifting sway of the branches. It's nothing but a tree, but there's value in it. Can a blemish have value? And that is the end of chapter 15. By golly gosh, we are making progress. Actually, funny story, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed that story, but I want to share something with you now. My buddy Jay, who is not here tonight, unfortunately, but I'm sure he wishes he was, he actually drew an image for that chapter, and I would love to share it with you now. Let me pull it up. I would love to share this image with you. 1 second, I need to pull it up real quick. There it is. Alright, need to decrease the size because it's a very... He never does small images. There we go. Now you can see it.
Well, let me know what you guys think of the picture and what you guys thought of the chapter while I drink something real quick. Picture should be up now. At least I hope it is. For some reason it's not showing up on my end. It's a little odd. Oh, that's why. Hold on, let me fix this on my end. My tablet's being a little odd. That's how I'm looking at chat right now. But yep, so that is the image that Jay drew. Jay's just an excellent artist. Anyway, tell you what, I'll leave that up for the duration of me reading, because I think we have time for one more reading. Would you guys like me to read the next chapter of New Epoch, or would you like me to do something different? Let me know in the chat. Trolling the cuteness. The cuteness is real. Just like the One Piece. No, sorry. Got the cough. It was from doing Josiah's voice. Alright, different. Next chapter. I've got one for different, one for next chapter. One more, please. Okay, that's 2 for a chapter. 2 for something else. 3 for a chapter. 4 for a chapter. 5 for a chapter. It looks like people want me to do one more chapter. Alright. Alright. Alright, let me take a look at what the next chapter is. It's chapter 16. Alright, I think we can do one more. Alright, let's do one more. We'll do one more reading of New Epic, and that'll probably be it for us tonight. Alright, here we go. Chapter 16. I wrote this April 13th, 2020. Here we go. It only took 2 days before the Inquisition began making its presence known. Grogner stood outside his shop, his little halfling sister holding his hand as armed men walked by. They were all human, clad in plate armor, with red and gold robes decoratively adorning their shoulders and waist. The Inquisitional mark could be seen emblazoned upon their armor and robes, a white emblem with a red cross in the center of it. The lines of the cross were all the same length, like a crusader symbol, but the cross was laid on top of an oval meant to represent the eye of God. It was a reminder to all who see it that the eye of the Inquisition was ever watching, and as Grogner watched soldiers marching the streets, he felt the eyes as if they were following him. Those eyes belonged to something for certain, but it wasn't God. But what's more, there was a woman at the head of the Inquisitional forces. She had blonde hair and deep eyes, with a long scar just along her cheek from her ear to her upper lip. Though it didn't take away from her beauty. She wore a tunic with the Inquisitional mark on it, but her appearance and demeanor told Grogner and everyone else watching that she was more than just a soldier. "Greetings, citizens of Orkshire," she shouted. People all around gathered to hear what this woman had to say. Grognar, too, led his sister out to sea, and he stroked his beard curiously, amazed by the audacity of her soldiers and the arrogance that seemed to echo about her. She presented herself as a fine agent of the Inquisition, but it felt forced, like she was holding back a revulsion. "My name is Vivienne. You may address me as High Priestess Valentine for the period that I am here. I understand that for the last several years you've been forced to endure unspeakable things at the hands of a tyrant High Orc. I can't imagine the suffering you've gone through." "You're telling us," Grognar growled under his breath. The other citizens seemed to be murmuring the same thing. Vivian didn't seem to notice, or she didn't act upon it. "But now, those days are behind you. The High Orc Josiah is no more, and your people are safe once again. But without a proper authority or government, I fear for your people and your way of life." So what? One man spoke up. The Inquisition wants first dibs on our lives. My wife is a dwarf. You going to put her to death? And my son is an elf. You keep your hands away from him. The crowd began to grow hostile, and while Grognar remained quiet, he too shared some of their sentiments. Would the Inquisition presence really be any better than Josiah? Cruel as Josiah was, he was no racist. He treated all of his subjects equally with contempt, though perhaps he did loathe Titania a little bit more than the others. But the Inquisition were biased towards humans and would not simply permit non-humans to coexist with the same kind of taxation, if not a purging of their houses. Vivian took the criticism with a solemn face and sighed, waiting for the chanting and shouting to end. When things finally settled down, she spoke again. I see our reputation precedes us, as I feared it would. I will not deny the opinions and stances of the Inquisition, and I will not deny the atrocities our organization has committed in the name of these positions. But I am not here to commit any more of them. I am here to restore peace for you and your people. To remind you of the light and forgiveness of the Lord, I make you a solemn vow that every non-human under my jurisdiction will be permitted to live freely as you always have, if you will simply grant the Inquisition quarter. The crowd hummed in disbelief. Had they heard her correctly? The Inquisition was willing to overlook non-humans? In exchange for your cooperation, we will aid you in the removal of Orc rule and the establishment of your own country, a sovereign land to call your own and able to engage in free trade and diplomatic negotiations with all church-oriented countries and provinces. Tell me, who has taken up the mantle of leader or head of duty since Josiah's defeat? No one spoke at first. No one had even considered this possibility, for as long as Orkshire had been ruled by Josiah, that no one had even considered who would take up the mantle of a leader now. Anyone? Vivian asked. When no one answered again, Grognar finally squeezed his sister's hand. Go home. I'll be back soon. He let go of her hand before the instruction had stepped forward. I'm no leader, but I was the one who finished off Josiah. If you want someone to negotiate with, I'm willing to listen. Not one person spoke as the old dwarf stepped up towards the guards standing around Vivienne. It was as if the very volume of nature had been muted, for the softest noise could not penetrate the silence. When at last Grognar finished approaching, Vivienne nodded. I see. Our reports have indicated a dwarf was involved. I imagine you are the one known as Grognar? Aye, he answered. Well, I suppose this is a fair compromise. Will you come with me, please, so we can speak privately? She asked. Vivienne stepped down and walked past her armed guards towards the Citadel main palace, which once was Josiah's living quarters. With an adamant and frustrated grunt, Grognar followed, eager to hear what the Inquisition High Priestess had to say. Mariel saw the Inquisition marching through the town and well, and stopped by houses, asking for information or lodging for the night. She'd been surprised, but a little happy for it, too. Keeping a low profile wasn't hard. She found herself a long-brimmed straw hat and put it on her head to hide her ears, and the rest was easy. Elves and humans looked so remarkably similar, it would be easy for her to pass as one. But what had amazed her about more than that was seeing Grognar walk off with the High Priestess. What was he planning? Or was he planning anything? It didn't matter. She needed to go back to Titania's place soon. The city was too chaotic right now. Having a cabin out in the mountains seemed like a very enviable commodity. Let go of me! Mariel turned fast at the sound of the shouting. There was a young man there with black hair and a stitched-up scar on his chin. He had on a peddler shirt and torn-up pants, but his feet were bare and worn, like he rarely wore shoes. His hands were blistered, and his black hair was dirty from lack of bathing. He was frantically struggling to get away from what Mariel immediately recognized as two large orcs. One had him by the arm, and the other was holding a small sword. Damn little pest, one snarled. Mariel gasped in shock, unsure of what to do. She couldn't go rushing in to save him. She wasn't a fighter. I said let go, the young man shouted, swinging weakly at the orc. Josiah's dead! You can't bully us anymore! You think this is about bullying, you little shit? Hand over what you got! It's mine! The boy shouted. Clutch in his hand was a pouch of jingling metal items that Mariel recognized to be coins. This was a mugging. Hey! Mariel shouted, finally unable to stop herself. She rushed towards the orcs angrily. The boy and the orcs both turned to face her, and they all looked greatly confused. Who's that? One asked. Wait, ain't she one of the slaves Josiah had? The other asked. She's like a bard or something. Mariel found herself petrified. Her instinct had been to run out and help this guy, but now there stood with no way to fight off these orcs or to help anyone. Get rid of her fast. Stand fast! It happened so fast, Mariel couldn't see the movement until it was over. 3 figures rushed down the alley just past Mariel. Wielding swords, the 3 armored figures adorned in Inquisition emblems charged the orcs. The 2 let out cries of horror and turned to flee, but never made it 3 steps as they were fell upon and gutted. Mariel looked away in horror as she heard the death screams of the orcs doomed to die. When she finally looked up again, the Inquisitional soldiers were removing their swords from the orc bodies, cleaning the blood from their blades. "That's 2 heretics dead," one growled through his helmet. "We're not done," the other replied. "Finish sweeping the back streets. Find any orcs left behind, and the ogre too." Ogre? Mariel only knew one ogre in Orkshire. Could they mean... "You two all right?" the third soldier asked, turning to the boy and Mariel. "Sorry for the fright."
"I'm okay, thank you," the boy replied, giving a polite bow. "I thought I was dead for a minute."
"Not while we're here. Go with God." The 3 soldiers sheathed their swords and marched off in search of their prey. As they went, Mariel followed their movements. They were merciless to the orcs, and they were hunting more. Not only that, but an ogre too. Were they after Titania? She had to warn her before it was too late.
"Thanks," the boy suddenly cried.
Mariel turned to the boy, who was beaming from ear to ear.
"Thank you so much, ma'am." "Oh, it wasn't anything," Mariel muttered. "I'm not much of a fighter." "Well, still, you tried to help, and that counts for something, right? My name's Michael, by the way." "Mariel," she answered. Michael held out his hand to shake, and Mariel took it. Michael was smiling broadly, and Mariel felt herself smiling too. Though she hadn't done much, it felt nice to be thanked. But she didn't have time to talk now. She had to get to Titania. "Well, stay safe. I gotta go." "Wait!" Michael cried, chasing after and grabbing her coat. "I was wondering if you could give me directions." "To where?" Michael suddenly fell really quiet and looked around nervously. He then held up the bag he had with jingling coins inside. It's a secret. It has to do with what's in this bag." "Money, I guess?" "Oh, no, definitely not." Michael smiled, opening the bag a little. Mariel glanced inside and was shocked to see gemstones, gorgeous and practically glowing, each one a different color and of different sizes and proportions. "These belong to my father. He gave them to me to get them appraised." "Well, for that, you'd need someone who's good at appraisal and stuff like that," Mariel grumbled. "I guess Grognar might know about it, or maybe Philip, but Philip's probably with Titania right now, and Grognar's with the Inquisition priestess." "Who are they?" Michael asked. "Well, they're friends of mine," Mariel replied. "Look, now it's not a good time to see them, I guess. Maybe you could just wait for a bit?" Michael nodded aside. "All right, well, thanks anyway." Mariel groaned, feeling guilty. Well, okay, what do you want to do with the gems anyway?" "Well, Father said he wanted to use them to renovate the town now that Josiah's dead," Michael smiled. "It would have been pointless to do anything with them while Josiah was around, but now? Well, now we can actually use them." "That's actually really cool," Mariel smiled. She then thought a moment and then winked. "I'll tell you what, come with me. I'll bet if we explain the situation to Philip, he'd be happy to help you and your dad." "But you just said he was busy." "He's with a friend of ours, but I doubt he'd be too busy to speak with you." Mariel laughed. "Besides, knowing Titania, she'd be happy to help in any way she could, too. She loves this town as much as your dad clearly does." "Well, is it far?" "A bit, but I know a shortcut," Mariel giggled, kneeling down and holding out her hand to shake Michael's again. Michael shook her hand, tearing up excitedly. Thank you, Mariel," he cried. "Where is your dad?" Michael paused a moment, then his smile faded, making way for a frown. He's in hiding with the Inquisition here. I guess he was an orc who worked for Josiah," Michael muttered darkly, showing a deep disdain. "Dad wasn't like everyone else, though. He just did what Josiah told him." "An honest orc? That's... No offense, that's hard to imagine." "Don't talk bad about my father," Michael snapped angrily. "He made sacrifices for me and my family. You know what it's like living every day in a hell like that? Living a lie?" Mariel was stung by the sudden anger Michael was showing. All right. Sorry, but I just didn't think... You know what? No, that's unfair of me," Mariel grunted. Let's just find Philip. He can appraise the gems, and we'll see if renovations can be made using the money. Who knows? Maybe that can help us start turning things around here in Orkshire. And that is chapter 16. Yep. Actually, we finished that earlier than I thought. I think we could do chapter 17. What do you say, guys? Want to try 17? I want to try 17. Let's just do it. Let's just do 17 and knock it out, and that'll be the end of the reading tonight. We'll just wrap it up here. All right. Need some more water before I do. We'll do one more. Last one. Then we call it a night. This one was written April 30th. New Epoch, Chapter 17. The building that Grognar and Vivienne stood in now was once Josiah's castle. Before that, it was a museum before the Cataclysm. Now is meeting ground for the two of them, the dwarf and the high priestess.
What would this building serve as next? Grognar felt an odd sense of connection to this structure. He too could understand it was like to be tossed about and reused by others. First by his school teachers, then Josiah, and now it seemed a high priestess. Grognar sat in a chair near the large dining table that Josiah used to hold meetings and meals at. Vivian did not take a seat, but ran her hand along the table and looked around. There was still blood and rubble on the ground from the fight, and a few orc bodies that had not been picked up and moved, so the room stank of death and decay. But living in Josiah's domain meant that you had to endure such inconveniences, and if Vivian couldn't deal with that, she had no business here. However, to Grognar's surprise and slight chagrin, Vivian seemed right at home in it, not even bothering to cover her nose or her mouth. This was Josiah's home?
It was. And I guess it works as a state of house of sorts for Orkshire, Grognar replied. Want anything to drink, ma'am? You've, come a long way.
A dwarf is offering a high priestess of the Inquisition a drink. A rather odd offer, don't you think, considering what you likely anticipate of me?
Nothing you do to me could compare to what Josiah's already done, Grognar answered coldly. I'm being good-mannered.
But that wasn't all Grognar wanted. He'd offered for a different reason entirely, but only time would tell if this goal would be met. Vivian shook her head and finally sat down in a chair across from Grognar. She placed her elbows on the table and leaned forward so Grognar could glare at her.
When I was a little girl before the Cataclysm, my mom used to read me stories about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. If you were one of the seven, who would you be?
Impatient, Grognar remarked.
I don't think that's one of the...
Are you patronizing me or just wasting my time? Grognar snarled.
Well, you'd definitely be grumpy, Vivian laughed.
She sighed and then glanced at Grognar's coat, and her eyes widened.
A pipe? Do you have tobacco? She asked.
Not the traditional kind, Grognar answered, pulling out his pipe and a small bag of herbs that he used in it. The Cataclysm aged me up a good few decades, so my body isn't used to these aches and pains yet. I smoke this stuff to help mask the pain. Aenor doesn't think it's dangerous or addictive like something that would be illegal pre-Cataclysm, but hell, who'd care if it was anyway?
May I? Vivian asked.
Grognar shrugged and tossed her the bag. Vivian took the small little bag and then whipped out a white strip of paper. She sprinkled the herbs onto the paper and rolled it expertly into a cigarette. Grognar was amazed at her skill in doing this and how swiftly she had a makeshift smoke ready to go. She then held up her fingers to the tip and whispered a spell to ignite it, sending a flash and then a small trail of smoke from it. She inhaled slowly and then exhaled the smoke from her nose, beaming with the release.
That's not half bad. Do you grow it yourself?
Aenor, the local doctor, helps grow it.
I'll definitely pay him a visit while I'm here, she sighed.
Back to the point, please. What's with the seven dwarves talk and the smokes discussion? Don't tell me you just want a small talk with an old dwarf.
Grognar asked, finally pushing the conversation back on track as he recognized. Vivian giggled and nodded.
Actually, that's exactly what I want. I don't want you to get the impression I'm some zealous racist out to slaughter all the heretics, she laughed.
Oh, I'm sorry, but the insignia on your chest on the flags you walked in here with say otherwise, Grognar remarked.
Yes, an unfortunate happenstance, and a reputation I wish we didn't have, she answered darkly. It's true that the Inquisition is largely racist towards other races that are non-human, and most who join up with them are in it to get back at the perceived evil races.
And you're an exception, I take it, Grognar laughed.
Laugh if you like, but not all of us join because we're human lovers, Vivian answered. My mother was kidnapped by a band of thieves, and there were humans among their number just as there were elves and halflings. Humans are just as capable of evil as any other race. She puffed on the cigarette and then sighed. I, like many, sought comfort and help from the church, but the three branches are very different from each other.
Are they now? Grognar asked.
The Seekers of Truth are a bunch of crusty old coots who spend most time delving into artifacts and caves looking for answers to this catastrophe than they do trying to preach the good word. The children of Christ preach peace and love to all, but they're not quick to act. The Inquisition, though...
Let me guess. They agreed to help find your mother? Grognar asked.
No, Vivian answered. They agreed to no such thing, and I knew they wouldn't. But the Inquisition does take the fight to evil. They are more active than the other two branches, and for that reason, and that reason alone, I joined their number as a Sister of the Spirit. I then worked my way up to Priestess of the Inquisition, and now High Priestess. I wanted to help fight the evil that's spreading around the world. I don't agree with everything the Inquisition says, but I do need them if I'm going to make the world safer for everyone.
So a necessary evil, then? Grognar asked. Fine. So what's that got to do with me and the rest of Orkshire?
The Inquisition wants control of Orkshire because it's nestled between three kingdoms, Caleron, Valimar, and the Catan Tangere Empire. That's not to mention the island of Sarandal to the east. If they can have this place as a foothold, then they can use it as a jumping-off point to try and gain influence in other countries. Their goal is not destruction of the people of Orkshire, but subjugation.
Well, honestly, I don't see much difference. Josiah subjugated us too and destroyed us just as easily.
Well, I'm not Josiah, she answered. I want to make it clear to you that while I'm governor of Orkshire, all non-humans will receive just treatment. I intend to keep things as fair and just as I possibly can.
Well, if what you're saying is true, then I can breathe a sigh of relief, Grognar answered. But that leaves 3 serious questions. The first, why tell me? The second is, what's the catch? And the third, will the Inquisition higher-ups approve of what you're doing?
Vivian's smile faded and she twirled a cigarette nervously. I told you because your town has no official leader as it is, but it seems that the folks here trust you to some extent.
I'm their blacksmith. And while Josiah ruled, I was a go-between, and I often tried to represent the citizens' interest to him when I could. I have no doubt that's where the faith comes from, Grognar shrugged.
The Inquisition higher-ups don't care about my methods or ruling so long as the results are good for their crusades in the neighboring lands. So long as those expeditions are successful, we need not worry about this place.
Fine. And what's the catch? Grognar asked.
Vivian struck the cigarette in her teeth before continuing. The orcs pose a threat. If a high orc appears among them again and tries to take back Orkshire, it could cause problems for the Inquisition. So I've been given orders to drive out or kill any remaining orcs in town, she explained.
Grognar winced at this news, thoughts drifting to his dad. What would he have to do? Would he stay and die? Would he run? What did he want to happen? Anything else?
I understand the Archangel helped you kill Josiah? Vivian asked.
Yeah, he did. Blemish,
Grognar nodded. But he didn't do it alone, though. You had help from another, didn't you? An ogress?
Ah, Titania, Grognar asked. She's a friend. What about her?
Vivian's face fell slightly. The Inquisition has reason to fear an ogress strong enough to go toe-to-toe with a high orc. She, too, can't be allowed to remain, Vivian explained.
What the hell are you...
I'm sorry, Grognar, but my orders were as follows. I am free to enact any disciplinary and judicial decrees that I see fit in Orkshire, and I'm free to conduct law and order at my discretion, on the condition that all orcs and the ogress who killed Josiah, the Devourer, are executed in the name of God. I'm afraid if I don't comply with this demand, then my position as High Priestess will be revoked, and I'll be replaced as governess here.
What the hell are you telling me this? Grognar bellowed, rising to his feet. You realize you just told me that you intend to execute my friend!
I'm telling you because if I'm not your governess, I can't guarantee my replacement will be as lenient and willing to let non-humans live as they please, she explained darkly as the truth began to sink in for Grognar. She shook her head sadly. Frankly, what I'm telling you is either you get me as governess and the non-humans live peacefully except Titania, or a new governor arrives to replace me.
Right. And then we're right back under a tyrant, Grognar concluded. You Inquisition bastards, sure you serve God? Because no God I know is so cold-hearted.
The will of the Lord is not mine to know, but it is the Inquisition's to carry out, Vivian whispered, though Grognar did notice there was a hint of sadness in her voice. It's right up this hill, Muriel said, fatigued and more than a little hungry. The sun was beginning to set in the distance, and it had been a long hike to get up the mountains to where Titania lived. Michael stayed close to her the whole time, panting from time to time, but never losing his excitement. Titania lives up there, and I think Philip is with her. And he can appraise my gems, Michael asked. I think so, she nodded. Michael grinned happily, clutching his bag of gemstones tightly. As they got further up, the cabin was coming into view. Sitting on the porch was Blemish, his mask hiding his face. He had a large book in his hand as he had a finger running along the page. Hearing Mariel approach, he turned his head up and waved to her, but his hand faltered when he saw Michael with her. His hand quickly went towards his sword. You were followed, he shouted. No, he's a friend. He's here to see Philip, Mariel assured Blemish. Michael backed up behind Mariel in fright. Who is that? He asked. That's just Blemish. He's an archangel with the Inquisition. You know, the guy who helped kill Josiah. Hearing this made Michael relax some and even come out from behind Mariel with interest. Really? Blemish, could you get Philip for me? I want his help with something, Mariel called. Blemish put away his sword and turned to the door of the cabin to knock on it. At last, Mariel made it to the porch. She let out a long and exhausted groan as she rubbed her forehead of any sweat. I need some water. Mind staying out here, Michael? Michael glanced at Blemish nervously, but nodded. Mariel gave a wink and hurried inside. Blemish stood outside by the door, and then his eyes fell on Michael, who gulped. They were both around the same height, maybe even the same age. Michael smiled sheepishly. So, you're with the Inquisition, then? Yeah, I am, Blemish muttered.
Does that mean you're friends with that high priestess lady who came to town today? Michael asked. Blemish blinked in surprise behind his mask. A high priestess was already here? He hadn't been aware of that. The Inquisition was already taking hold. How long did that give him? How long did that give Titania? He knew the Inquisition would at the very least be hostile towards her. Maybe he could put in a word for her. The priestess would understand. She had to. I don't know her, Blemish answered. Archangels... He fell silent again. He cursed himself silently. Living with Titania so long had made his tongue too loose. Stop giving away secrets. She seems nice enough, but... I don't get it. I thought Inquisition people don't like non-humans. Yeah, we usually don't, Blemish grumbled. And yet here you are living with an ogress. Blemish bit his lip behind his mask. Damn it. Was his whole life really just a big jigsaw puzzle falling to pieces? It felt so wrong. The Inquisition was here now. His mission was done and Josiah was dead. Why did he linger? He could go ahead and report to the Watcher and prepare for his next mission. But he didn't want to go. And that alone was the greatest issue he faced. Well, it's good to know you're on our side, Michael smiled. Your side? The right side, right? Michael giggled, holding his bag of gems. Josiah's gone, the Orc Kingdom has fallen, the Inquisition will try and bring peace, and once I trade these gemstones for my dad, we can buy the renovations for the Citadel and make it worth something again. That's noble, Blemish agreed softly. I understand you want me. Blemish and Michael turned to see Philip walking out the door with Titania behind him. Michael gawked at Titania's size and height, which towered over him. She smiled and sat down beside Blemish, who was beaming behind his mask, his troubles and concerns fading away. He sat down next to her in contentment. Michael, in the meantime, held out his bag of gems. I want this appraised, please. How much are they worth? Philip took the bag and sighed, pulling out a small magnifying glass. Well, I'm not much for shiny rocks. That's more of a dwarf thing, but I might make an estimate. He took 2 rubies from inside the bag and inspected them carefully, looking them up and down and turning them over. Oh, these are nice. Where did you get these? Dad said they were dug up in the slave mines to the north. He kept some for himself without the other orcs knowing, Michael explained. If that's what they're mining in that place, then I'll bet the dwarves and orcs shall be very interested in it. These are quality rubies. I can't say an exact amount, but just these 2 stones right here are worth 5 times your weight in gold. And if your bag is full of stones like these, well, you might have a small fortune on your hands, he explained. You really think so? Could it be used to pay for damages to the city? That's our goal with the stones. We want to renovate the Citadel, Michael pleaded. Renovate the Citadel? Titania asked. That's kind of a tall order. Well, it's not impossible, right? Michael challenged harshly. It's Dad's dream. Settle down, kid, Philip snapped. Dream or not, this bag won't quite be enough for something that big. It won't? Michael asked. His body seemed to deflate at the sad news. Well, don't get me wrong. This is a good amount of money right here, and you could do some real good with it, but overhauling the Citadel would take probably 5 or 6 more bags of this size to be possible, Philip answered, dropping the 2 rubies back in the bag and handing them to Michael. And even if you had the bags, Titania pointed out, it's not like the Inquisition are going to let you just suddenly start fixing up the city without their approval. They'll probably start making things the way they want them. It's going to take more than just money to fix the Citadel. Well, I mean, change has to start somewhere, right? You just have to know where to start, Michael sighed. He held the bag with a definite sense of anguish, but nodded. Well, thanks for looking at it for me, sir. Anytime, kid, Philip whined. And if you ever find more gems like that and are looking to sell them, look me up again. I might, Michael agreed. He then turned to Titania and Blemish. Also, Father told me that if I met you, I should tell you, thank you for the good you did in killing Josiah. Hey, Grognar pulled the trigger. I just got in a few punches, Titania smiled. But all the same, you're very welcome. I hope Father and I can thank you better soon. Michael turned to walk back down the hill, but Titania was on her feet fast. You're leaving? It's getting late. At least let Mariel or Blemish walk you home. Oh, I'll be fine. I'm plenty tough enough on my own, Michael reasoned. Not a good idea, Philip replied, standing up. With the Inquisition wandering around, no one is necessarily safe. I've got to go into town anyway. I'll walk with you. Michael beamed and waited on Philip to catch up. As the 2 walked away, Titania crossed her arms and looked at Blemish. Think you made a new friend? She asked. Blemish didn't answer, but slowly nodded his head. His mind kept going back to what Michael said. The Inquisition doesn't like non-humans. Well, he was Inquisition. So why did he feel so comfortable with non-humans? Was he broken? A heretic? But Titania wasn't just a sinner. She was more than that. Tell you what, I'll get supper started. You got some logs for the firewood, okay? Mariel's going to join us tonight. Right. I'll be back soon, Blemish agreed, rising to his feet and jogging to the woods to gather wood, and to be alone with his thoughts on who he was, and just what in God's name he was supposed to be feeling. And that is the end of chapter 17. Boy, a lot happened there. A lot happened there. Let me check on chapter 18. Let me see what happens in it. Oh, this chapter. Well, y'all really did a good job tonight. I'm actually very happy that everyone has been behaving and doing such a good job. Very pleased with that. And it is 10:36 now. Normally I wrap up the stream here. But I see that some people are still itching for more, so I don't know if I should read chapter 18 to you guys. It is a good chapter. It's a short chapter. What would you guys like? I will leave it up to you guys. I need a drink first. Yep, Hannah, you were here. Thank you for that. Yep, I've got some people saying we should leave it here. Okay. All right, well, then I think we'll... what's this, may we? Leave something for next time? All right, everyone seems to want to leave it for next time. All right, then we'll leave it there for next time. Very well. Well, I want to thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. This was a lot of fun, and because y'all were on such good behavior and things went a lot better this time, we will definitely do this again next Monday, because I assume that I will have Monday night off next Monday. I will keep you guys up to date on what happens. There's so much that I can't wait to read more to you guys, because trust me, once I'm done reading New Epic to you guys, because I haven't finished the story, but that won't stop me from reading up to where I left off. Next time, once I finish New Epic, I'll read another story series to you guys. We'll just have a good old time. Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. I really did have a good time, and let me go ahead and delete this so that it's out of there. There we go. And now that that's gone, now I will go ahead and log off. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in my next video. Take care.